All right, I want to talk about movies and how I like to watch them, and then also showing how when you begin to watch popular culture from certain perspectives, how it begins to spill over into your regular life. So I want to begin with Matt Damon. I was first introduced to the idea, I don't know, like 10 years ago, was it? When I first started following Chris Knowles, and he would talk about actors being archetypes, and that archetype will show itself throughout all of the different films in which they do. And the most obvious example that I recall from Chris's work had to do with Brad Pitt, and how Brad Pitt is this archetype of death. And then when you begin to go and look at his full catalog of films, you begin to see how that shows itself over and over and over again. So then that really resonated with me. And then I remember seeing a video, and I don't recall who did it, but they showed the link between the movie Back to the Future and the movie, I think it was called The Wire, and it showed how this story, which was told originally told in the 80s with Back to the Future, which had a lot of interesting predictors of 9/11, and then how that linked up to the movie The Wire, which was, I think it was called The Wire, in which it was like a fictional history of the guy who walked the high wire between the two towers. And I have not seen the movie, but I'm familiar with the concept. And I saw this video and it linked the two, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. And then that inspired me to kind of combine those two different ideas and then look at how different actors have a continuous storyline throughout the different films which they're in. But it's happening on a deeper level. Like, it's not obvious, but as soon as you can see it, it does become obvious. So the first time I really got into that was with a connection between Keanu Reeves' character in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and then Neo in The Matrix. And I did a post about that on Instagram a while ago. Maybe I'll make a video about it, but that one was wild. But I want to talk today about Matt Damon and a couple different films. So going along this line of thought of like actors or having certain themes or archetypes throughout their career, I want to point out some when we see Matt Damon. Like, he's known for his Bourne Identity, the trilogy, and that deals with CIA and spycraft and MK Ultra type of programming and all this sort of stuff. And then another film he made was called The Talented Mr. Ripley, and that was very much like it was very it was based upon a book, but it tells the story of this psychopath who is infiltrating the upper echelons of like the social economic class, like the moneyed class. And so it tells this story of this outsider who like comes in and takes a new identity within the wealthy class, and it's very creepy. But I particularly like that film because it has amazing cinematography. It was filmed on location in Europe, and so I always think that's cool. And there's a similarity between this and the Bourne Identities. I mean, the Bourne Identities were filmed in a very similar style. You don't see that many films that are done filmed on location, and Bourne Identity was filmed in Europe, very similar to Talented Mr. Ripley. And it also has to do with identities and psychopathy and like all sorts of weird, like you can see the overlaps. Then I also want to point out a film which he made, Dogma, in which he played a fallen angel. And so if you could begin to like weave all of these different themes together, you can begin to go and see like a really a different stories being told. So it's Matt Damon who we're going to begin with, and I've always had personally, I've always had like a resonance with Matt Damon, and we all do this if we watch movies. I mean, this is why the archetypical quality of stars is so powerful, because how our psychology works is we identify with certain actors and certain roles which archetypically we feel similar to, and that can be in many different ways. But I certainly felt that way with Matt Damon. And Matt Damon first was really introduced to the public in the movie Good Will Hunting. And it was really that movie which it came out in 1997, so I would have been 26 at the time. And it was it definitely was a movie which affected me, and the very fact that its release date is my birthday. Like, there's all these sort of things. I don't know if I knew that at the time, but there was this resonance. And if you haven't seen Good Will Hunting, I'd recommend to go see it, because this is also where Matt Damon was introduced to the collective consciousness. So I'm not certain exactly like the nuts and bolts of like how much planning is done when stars or celebrities are rolled out to the public, but the stuff is, nothing happens by chance. So Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, they were given the doors were open wide for them for being very successful in the Hollywood industry. And it's because this movie Good Will Hunting, which was directed by Gus Van Sant, who really took the script, which is accredited to Damon and Affleck, and he made it into a really good piece of storytelling. But and Matt Damon and Ben Affleck they got, I believe, they got the Academy Award for Best Screenplay. And whenever you get an Academy Award, like the doors are more or less opened up for you. What's interesting is I'm telling this like right around the Harvey Weinstein time. And Weinstein was the guy who made this movie happen. It was Weinstein's first really big studio. It was Miramax, and when Miramax first came out, like the films were all like really good. And Weinstein, as the principal of that company, he literally had the ability to green light people and literally turn their lives from just being a regular person to like, now you are now a star. And maybe there's more to it, like cloning and all that other stuff. I don't know, but like that on the most basic level happens, and he has that capability. And this was done for Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. And if you go and you look back at the history, you can see like they were always tied at the hip. And so Harvey Weinstein made this happen, and this is how he was introduced to the public. And so we can go and see earlier what some of the then films which he did. And we know that this is the seed where he began. The themes in those, like the Born Identity and The Talented Mr. Ripley and Dogma and other films, but those are the ones which I want to focus upon. We can see the themes which they share there, and we can see where they began in Good Will Hunting. And what we see in Good Will Hunting is you see this spectacular mind. This was around the same time as the movie The Beautiful Mind came out. So there was a lot of like consistent messages and programming of a certain type of ability to see the world. And this Matt Damon character was, he was from like this horrific background of torture, and he was an orphan, and like all, like just everything which you could imagine if that was a real person, like, you know, all of what that would do to them. And he carried all of the emotional scars that would come from someone who would have this type of experience. Now keep in mind, this is very, very similar to the Bourne Identity, in the fact that what sort of programming the individual had to go through in order to reach the excellence in being an assassin in the Bourne Identity. We're seeing the same thing with this Good Will Hunting character, because he goes, and despite all of this sort of like horrific stuff, he also had the most beautiful mind in the world, and we saw that mathematically, and he could see things like no one else could see. And the movie then kind of follows him through going from like this really kind of dead end future with this Rolls Royce ability, and how his life kind of was twisted around, and he got new direction as he also began to address and heal his deep emotional scars. So all of this is set up. How long have I even been talking to? So 11 minutes is set up, because this is where we're going to go to. We're going to go to the movie The Martian. And so, as I indicated, I always had a thing for like Matt Damon films. You know, like that character resonates with me, and all of the and that actor resonates with me, and the movies which he's done, it resonates. I'm interested in it. And about, I don't know, like a year ago, my partner Jenny, she was saying, you should see the movie The Martian. And I have an aversion to like space movies, and it's primarily there's a claustrophobic quality which shows up in the cinematography when you see a film which takes place mostly like within a spaceship or something like that. Like that's unsettling to me. I don't like that, as just like consuming esoteric entertainment, if you will. And as I said before, like, you know, what I really liked was the cinematography, which you would see in the films that were done on location in Europe. Like, you know, that's wide open, and it's visually very, very expansive, versus like these space films, which can often take the majority of the film happens on a spaceship. I just don't like that. So I had an aversion to The Martian. I remember when it came out, and I was intrigued, because I'm always aware, like there's certain actors and actresses that are on my radar, that I just note what films they're in. So when The Martian came out, I was like, you know, there's part of me which was interested in it, because I like to follow the different films which Matt Damon does. And I know it was really well received, but I could never go and see it because of the whole sort of space thing. And then I saw it, and one, it wasn't nearly as claustrophobic as I thought. I thought it was like, you know, in terms of like storytelling, it was like, I got it. It was a good film. Like I was intrigued by it. It kept my attention. But what I really like to do when I watch films is I like to make these connections. And so I always go back to certain touch points in terms of like what you're going to go and compare, like one of these etheric lines within an actor's filmography. And one of them obviously would be Good Will Hunting. I said how much I enjoyed the film, both like from entertainment, but then also like for a lot of different reasons. And when I'm watching The Martian, it became so evident, more than any other sort of link I've ever seen. I'm like, oh, this is who Good Will Hunting became. And what we're beginning to see are different, you know, maybe we could call them timelines, maybe we could call them trajectories. But we're seeing the same Good Will Hunting character, and we're seeing that sort of capability showing itself in different sort of settings. And if you'll notice, they all have to do with the government and the military or military-industrial complex. And that was a major part also within Good Will Hunting, as there's a very famous a scene where he goes and is interviewed by the NSA, and he basically breaks down why he has an ethical problem with like how the NSA works. So then we go to the Martian. And so in the Martian, we see the Good Will Hunting character. And what we know about Good Will Hunting is he's got the most amazing mind. And this Martian character who is left by himself and forgotten on Mars is able to show this type of like unbelievable ingenuity and creativity and precision to like solve all these like amazing problems. So we see that similarity. And then you begin to realize like the character of the Martian is a demonstration of a lot of the characteristics of Good Will Hunting. Specifically, like the sense of humor. Like Good Will Hunting had this very like, it's like almost an aggressive sense of humor, like making fun of like the people he cares about most. And this character has the same type of humor. That was a big part of both of those characters. And then we see that both characters have no family. So that was another similarity. And then we also see that the characters were immensely loyal to their friends. And so you can begin to see this is how they link up. And we see, and it would make sense also, like, you know, a Good Will Hunting character who did not want to go and apply his beautiful mind to the system, particularly like the military industrial complex system. He goes and applies it to NASA, and he applies it through the field of botany, something which, you know, cannot be used to hurt people. Now, if you know kind of how the real world works and how Hollywood works, you also know like there's all sorts of embedded like, you know, pro-government propaganda. And so this is it too, like, you know, it's reflecting back upon itself. It's implying like, you know, NSA is bad, but NASA is good because he works for NASA. And if you know the connections, you'll know like, you know, it's the same thing. But, you know, that aside, we're going to go and say this is the subconscious narrative which is being put out there. And they're telling this like this is the Good Will Hunting story where he reaches his full potential and as a human being. And, you know, the Bourne Identity was a different Good Will Hunting sort of character where he became the world's greatest assassin. They're both like the best in their fields. And so I saw that, and there I could go on probably. I was thinking about doing a full presentation just on those similarities, but all of this has been in the back of my mind, and this is all like the build-up. So I've been following this kind of this, as I said, this Matt Damon story, and I really got this really really strong connection when I saw it with The Martian, and I felt really good about it. Like, you know, I was like patting myself on the back. It was something I had a strong internal feeling about. And so what I'm trying to show to you is I'm beginning to link myself to this story. And we all do that. This is how like part of the magic of like popular culture is we begin to connect our own stories into these mythic tales which are being told. And it's all happening on this deep, deep subconscious level. But when I'm pointing it out, you'd be like, okay, yes, this is how it works. This is how it's communicated. So I'm hooked. You know, that's one of the things that happens when you go and you look at these films this way. You know, you do get hooked into the system, and I don't know if that's necessarily good or bad. If you have an awareness, you can navigate it with more clarity, and that's what I try to do because ultimately I am part of the system. I am using a computer. I was born during this time, so that's my personal approach with this. But I definitely think that if you begin to apply this in your own life and seeing like, you know, who are the actors or the films which speak to me, and how can I follow these threads? You'll begin to see this in your own life, and that's what this is. What I want to demonstrate here is how this circles back. Okay, so I said that I had a difficulty with The Martian, and I saw it and I was pleasantly surprised. So shortly after seeing that, Jenny says to me, she's like, you know what, maybe we should see Interstellar. And I was like, definitely not. I do not want to see Interstellar. That is, I'm thinking in my mind, that's going to be so friggin' claustrophobic, and I don't want to watch it. But I knew that Christopher Nolan did it. And Christopher Nolan is another one of these characters in the Hollywood story, because they all are characters. You know, we're given these characters, but Christopher Nolan is a character, and his style of filmmaking is intriguing to me. I think he's a very, very good storyteller. There's always like kind of a dark element to it, which I find intriguing. And the dude knows his stuff. And so if you're able to recognize symbology and deeper messages, like his films have a lot. So I know that Interstellar is connected to that, but I was a little bit put off by Matthew McConaughey. There's as an actor, I've got a following him. For me, there's a strange dynamic I have with his body of work. There's certain roles which I really like, and I'm very familiar with his body of work. And like Matt Damon, he has a very, very well established like seed introduction to the American public or the collective mind, and his was with the movie Dazed and Confused. Another film, very, very worth watching again, particularly from the perspective of this being a film which is, you know, a major piece of magic of, you know, whatever you want to say it. We can have some hindsight to it. But anyway, so Matthew McConaughey, I've had a different type of awareness and connection with his movies, which he's been in, and it's not always the most positive. I don't resonate as strongly with his work as I did with Matt Damon. So that was kind of like I didn't want to see it because he's the star of that film, but I eventually saw it, and just like the Matthew McConaughey film. It was not what I thought, or the Matthew Damon film. It was not what I thought, and it was a good film. Like it was an interesting storytelling film. But now this adds in like a whole nother layer into this plot, and the point I'm trying to do is, one, to like, you know, it's an interesting story, so I want to share that. Two is I want to show how you know, we all do this, and by understanding, like by looking at what has spoken to us, we can learn more about our own internal pathways and also like where we're guided with these etheric pathways created by the Hollywood and pop culture system. So back to Interstellar. So Interstellar came out, like I didn't see either one of these films in the theaters, but they came out within a year of each other. And this is around 2014, 2015. And Matthew Damon plays a non-credited cameo role in it. And he's done that once before. He did that in Saving Private Ryan, which very much like fits with this motif of not really knowing what you're working with. You know, there's this hidden element, but it's also like, you know, it's always like a pleasant surprise, I suppose. And so Matt Damon, he, like I was already hooked into the film before Matt Damon was introduced into the film, probably about the midway point, because the film was immediately, it was an obvious resonance retelling of a similar story, which was the film Contact. Because Matthew McConaughey was in this film, Contact. And Contact came out in 1997, which was the same year as Good Will Hunting. And Matthew McConaughey had already been established as an actor in like the collective consciousness. But I believe Contact was the first film where he was stepping into serious actor mode. Like he played a serious role. He wasn't who he played in Dazed and Confused. And so Contact is very, very similar to Interstellar. and particularly in two ways, because Interstellar deals a lot with a relationship between a father and daughter, and Contact also has a lot to do with a father and daughter relationship, and that father daughter relationship driving the daughter to succeed in new heights in the field of space travel. That's another very, very strong message which is being put out in the subconscious of Hollywood, is the role of women as the driving force of space travel. Three examples would be this movie Contact, the movie Interstellar, and then I don't recall the name of the film, but it was about like the women who were behind the encoding of like it may have even been ENIAC, the computers back in like the early days of space travel, and they were the real heroes. They were the ones who really got us there. So this is a consistent message which is being told in Hollywood. But back to Interstellar. So Interstellar deals with this relationship between a father and daughter, and then what it does, and this is what Christopher Nolan does so well as a storyteller, is these are a lot of there are multiple complex storylines within the movie Interstellar, and each one of them would probably be difficult to articulate on their own. And so to do it well, it's easy to consume. Like there's some movies like you might watch, Inception comes to my mind, where they're dealing with some complex sort of ideas, and I think it slightly missed the mark. It was too difficult to really wrap your mind around, and perhaps that was the intention. But what Interstellar, I think, did is it dealt with a lot of different, like, complex topics like that with multiple storylines, and it was told in a very digestible way, in a way which was watered down for us that we can really consume. And so we're dealing with in Interstellar this time travel and dimensions as they go through a black hole. And well, actually, let me go back to. So I'm gonna pause there, and I'm gonna reconnect this to the Matt Damon. I want to finish the Matt Damon connection with Interstellar, and then I'm going to go back to what Interstellar and Contact connect to, and the multi dimensions. But so Matt Damon, we saw in The Martian, was Goodwill Hunting. Following a trajectory of like the best possible expression of his gifts and of the circumstances. And so we're given, like, you could call it an alternative timeline or an alternative trajectory, like whatever you think about, like, or like the potentialities of what haven't existed. When you think about like all of the different things that can happen, this would be an example. And so an example, what we're seeing here with the Martian and Interstellar are going to be example of two different expressions. So the Martian was the best, and Interstellar is the worst. And so Interstellar probably picks up, like you got Goodwill Hunting, and he gets somehow involved with NASA, and he becomes an astronaut, and then he goes and he's left on a planet. That's what these two characters have in common. And then you got the Martian, and he figures everything out, and he's saved by his friends, and it's this it was complex. It was a complex emotional tale because there's also a loneliness which you felt within the Martian character, which is very much going to be the Goodwill Hunting character as well, because he didn't have a family. He had a horrific childhood. So like, even if one can become stabilized in life, and that's what happens when working with these very, very strong, emotional, experiential, psychological effects. Like, we can become very, very well adjusted and be able to have meaningful lives, but there's always a part which died. and and so how that would be expressed is like there's a loneliness, there's something that this person, this Goodwill Hunting character, is missing in his life. You know, it's the sacrifice, if you will. Same thing with Jason Bourne. Like Jason Bourne, like this character, if you think about it, this dude can do anything. He's like, I have the skills where I can go anywhere. And he was like, when he got out of the system, like he could have done whatever he wanted. Like he had a freedom which very, very few people have. Yet he had also, like, you know, if you could imagine that as a real person, or you in that position, there's also a very, very large hole. And so we saw that with the Martian. We see that with the Bourne, and now we see it expressed in Interstellar in a different way. So the Matthew McConaughey character arrives to this one planet, and there is a previous astronaut there who's like in a bed where you can sleep for a long time, and your body doesn't deteriorate. You know, that's how the story is told. And he wakes up. The Matt Damon character wakes up, and he sees people, and he thought he was going to die alone. And remember, like, there's a loneliness. That's what this character has. And he has experienced his worst fear he could possibly have. I am literally all alone. You know, that is the deepest fear from like that childhood perspective. I'm all alone. And now this character, he is all alone. And as it turns out, the character wakes up and he gives this huge embrace. And if you watch Goodwill Hunting, one of the most the emotional climax of the film was when he embraces Robin Williams, his psychiatrist, in this like first real showing of emotion. But we see this certain way that it's expressed, and it is expressed the exact same way when the Matt Damon character wakes up in Interstellar. And when you see that, they're telling you like, okay, we're tapped in like on this like kind of deep like emotional pain sort of level. And so as it turns out, the Matt Damon character, the reason why the Matthew McConaughey character went to this particular planet was because they were given false information from the Matt Damon character. He tricked them to coming in there. They would have gone somewhere else, but he tricked them. And he made it sound that where they landed was much more of interest to the Matthew McConaughey mission. And so Matt Damon did it for selfish reasons because he didn't want to die alone. He's if anyone's going to come out, I'm going to do whatever I can to go and get them there. And then once he kind of like resettled into his Thomas Ripley, the psychopath, he stepped into his own psychopathy and could justify whatever means he had to do. And he realized he had to kill the Matthew McConaughey character. And it shows them in this fight, Matthew McConaughey and Matt Damon, and it's very reminiscent to the very beginning of Goodwill Hunting, where we see him being very, very violent, very, very like, you know, could justify any types of behavior. And again, like, you know, that would be the normal one of the normal psychological expressions of someone who would have gone through what this Goodwill Hunting character went through. So we're seeing these different interstellar Matt Damon connections. And I'm going to add this just to show you how this etheric web also goes back to 1997. So another part of Interstellar had to do with Matthew McConaughey communicating with his daughter. He gets lost in space, and then he like exceeds like time, and he's able to go through and connect back to his daughter at an earlier time. So this is how it works with like these different these different timelines, and then he's able to do that because he goes to a higher dimension. And Christopher Nolan was able to express that like in a way which is like, okay, I can visualize what that looks like. He did it very, very well. And what the film does is it's dealing with it's like circling back. Like that's what we're doing right now with 1997 and Good Will Hunting, is we're circling back, because within Interstellar it begins with like Matthew McConaughey like living a regular life with his daughter, and like another when the Earth is like 100 years from now, and all sorts of stuff's going on, and like there's this weird sort of thing which is happening. And so what was happening was something with books in a room and a watch. And so as this film unfolds, and then the Matthew McConaughey character is able to prevail over really Matthew Damon, Matthew McConaughey. They're the same. They're the same archetype. They came out at the same time. They're both named Matthew. They were done differently, but you can see how they're connected. And they came together and they fought. And then the Matthew McConaughey character won, or that different aspect. So we can look at this as Good Will Hunting. It shifts from like it being Matthew Damon to Matthew McConaughey in this like Good Will Hunting thread. But the Matthew McConaughey character, after he faces and prevails against the Matthew Damon character, it then gets like into like going into black holes and time and higher dimensions and being able to go back in time. And then suddenly all of the strange things that happened in the beginning of the movie, it made sense. So like, oh, okay, because Dad was going back in time, he was communicating, and he was communicating interdimensionally. And so what we see in Contact is this Jodie Foster character who's very, very similar to the daughter of Matthew McConaughey in the film Murphy. He's very, very similar, both in terms of kind of like looks and in terms of like personality to the Anne Hathaway character. This is where there's a resonance. And instead of Matthew McConaughey and the woman having a romantic chemistry, it was father and daughter chemistry. But within the Contact film, she was driven by the death of her father. Now, within Jodie Foster's career, you know that that's a theme as well, because of the Silence of the Lambs. If you recall what that film was about. But regardless, so we see in Contact, there's this scene where she goes, they build a spaceship, and she's also dealing with like interdimensional travel. And she goes into this like astral realm, or whatever you want to call it, where she is connecting with her father in a very, very similar way to how we begin to realize that in the movie Interstellar, that the Matthew McConaughey character was connecting with both himself and with his daughter through this like interdimensional time warp. That's what's happening. And so you could go and see these similarities. And in the movie Interstellar, there are these fictional elements which have to be used, or the artistry of telling the stories. You need to have props. You need to give something which the storyline wraps around. And in Interstellar, it was the watches. The father and daughter each had a watch. And it was a major part of how they connected. And it turns out like that the Matthew McConaughey character was communicating like by code on the watches. So he was manipulating these watches that they both were seeing. And so these watches, it represents both the bond of like this father and daughter. It was interesting because there's no mother in both Contact and within with Good Will Hunting and with Interstellar. but we see that the watch represents how they connect. It represents giving a secret piece of information, and it also represents synchronization. Because at the end of the day, what a watch is, it's not about time, because time is meaningless and arbitrary. Timing is the only thing that matters. And they're related, but they're different. Timing is when two events or multiple events happen at the same time. And time is the lag between them. The numbers are arbitrary. It's the timing of everything. And what synchronization does is it synchronizes you. So, okay. So I watch Interstellar on it was February 20th. So today's, I think, the 28th. And so it was like a week ago. And I'm watching this. And so as you can imagine, everything I told you, like, this movie is like, I'm deeply hooked because I've been on this thread since 1997, aware of it for probably like the last 3 years. When I say aware, I mean aware of like watching movies and following these storylines. And so as I'm watching this Interstellar, I'm like, wow, this is really, really, it's hitting me on many, many levels. And particularly with the watch, like I have all of this stuff just by watching like movies, and it's more or less like, I'm not saying this is unique to me. I'm saying this is part of the magic of Hollywood, and this is true for all of us. If we begin to go and look at like what we're consuming and how we're tapped in to really like popular culture, we're going to find incredibly personal and incredibly specific sort of connections. So that's what I'm beginning to demonstrate. I've shown you how, like, I've been following this thread for a while, and that watches are very, very significant. And the reason why that really struck home to me was because I've been studying watches in some of the earlier work I did. Specifically, I talk about watches and its connection to the Susquehanna mystery in a video which is called Mystic Lancaster Part 3, the Rose Line, the Timeline, and the Line of Prophecy. And I talk about this one particular road as being a physical manifestation of an etheric line which goes from where this major event occurred in Lancaster. It was the Treaty of Lancaster, 1744. And then 3 lines came from that point and connected to the river. And so one of them is the watch line or the timeline, and I connect that to Saturn, and so because Saturn, is time, and so this has already been in my consciousness, in my research, and already connected to me. And this idea of the significance of watches and time, because on one of these roads was the headquarters of the former headquarters, it's not the headquarters there anymore, of the Hamilton Watch Company. And I got all into the Hamilton Watch brand. I researched it and I found out it was like fascinating. It was like the biggest brand on the planet in terms of market share, like back in the 50s. And like, it's a really, really rich history, and I saw how that connected, like both symbolically and both literally, on all of this research. So it was really meaningful for me. And so when I saw that this movie was about a watch, or a watch was a major element within telling the story, and I know that this story was something which has been like inside, which I've been following and connecting for some time, I was like, let me go take a closer look. And so when you took a closer look, you'll see that both of these watches are Hamilton watches. Remember, it's Hamilton Watch Company, which was the cornerstone of this one element of the Susquehanna mystery. So now this is becoming really friggin' personal for me. And so to bring it all home, I'm at 44 minutes. I was planning on only talking for 15. To bring it all home and to show this interconnection is I said I watched this movie on February 2nd, 2020, 2/20/2020. And I'm aware of numbers just because I'm aware of numbers, but I don't go too deep into that. I like to go deep in other stuff, but numbers are certainly on my awareness. And I recognize, like, as I said before, time doesn't matter. The numbers don't matter. Like, that year is arbitrary, but on the same level, so many people subscribe to it. It does become alive just through that power alone. So there is something about that. And I'm talking about there's synchronization. So I just realized, like, all of those twos. Anytime you have like a lot interesting numbers on a date, there is some degree of synchronization. So I was aware of that, and so 2 days later, it was on the 22nd. Jenny and I were taking a trip down to Mr. Rich's sauna at Nome Countryside. It's literally like Nome Countryside. Go look it up. It's this fantastic place. So, man, he's 80 years old, and I've been fortunate enough to have a really, really strong relationship with this man, and he's played a very positive role in my life, my personal life. And so one of my favorite things to do is he would have these saunas, and it was like this. It was built. He built it, and it's like with the heat is generated from a wood iron or a wood burning pit, which then goes through this enclosed room. The piping does, and we pour water on it, and the steam is what creates this sauna. And it's you go down there, and it's very, very intense. And me and Jenny were going down there, and that's always a big deal. And one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to pick up my watch, because his son Case, his name is Case, he literally graduated #1 from the Rolex School of Watch Repair. It's in Lidditz, Pennsylvania. This is all in Lancaster. And so in Lidditz, which is a town in Lancaster, it's got the Rolex School of Watch Repairers there. And he graduated #1 from his class. Like, that shows like some degree of alignment with all sorts of stuff you could read into it. Like, it's something. Now, he's not a watchmaker anymore. He's made some fantastic pieces. He just teaches art at a local high school. That's what he's doing with his time. But obviously he knows what he's doing. And I had a watch, and I wanted him to it stopped working. I think it just needed a new battery. And I was like, I want to give it to Case to fix, because everything I try to do is I try to work in like a conscious element of what this represents energetically, what it's symbolic of, because these are etheric lines. And this is like bringing an awareness to the etheric lines we bring to our everyday life. And the watch is meaningful to me. Watches always have been. I personally have like an issue with time. Like I'm really good at, I always know what time it is. I'm typically, if anything, I'm early. I guess maybe timing. Sometimes my timing has been off, and that's a very Sagittarius type of quality. And so it's timing has been something I've been working with my entire life. And I've always had a thing with watches, and I love to wear watches. But I would never like actually look at it. I just like the watch. I love the stopwatch feature. And I had a watch which was really meaningful to me. It was when I got married in 1997. My ex-wife, she gave me as like an engagement gift. She gave me this awesome watch, and I loved it. It was a really nice watch. It was a Baume & Mercier, and I liked it. And when she and I split up, that was probably 2015. That marked a major change in the trajectory of my life. And that watch, which I've had for, I guess we were married for 15 years, so I had for 15 years. Is that right? Maybe longer than that. I put it in the wash. Like, I washed my clothes, and that watch was in my pocket. And this watch had like, it meant something to me, both like with my relationship with time, both my relationship with like what a like a nice physical good. I don't have a lot of things, but the things I have, I like them to be nice. And so like this was a really nice piece, and like that was ruined. And but I was okay with it because I was recognizing at the time like something's unfolding, and there's it was painful, but I'm like, okay, I'm going along with this. And I did not resist. So fast forward about 2 years later, and I begin doing the research, which became the Susquehanna mystery, which became the Susquehanna alchemy. And as I told you, this whole like Hamilton Watch Company thing was really, really part of the story. And I always had a thing for watches. And so I came to a point where I'm like, I'm ready to step into my next watch. I'm ready to synchronize. That's what a watch is. It's a synchronizer. I'm ready to synchronize myself. And I'm like, I'm synchronizing myself with this energy of really understanding what this etheric plane is of the Susquehanna mystery and the Susquehanna River. And so just made sense. I'm going to get a Hamilton watch. And so I looked I began doing research because I'm really particular over like the way things look and fit. And so I spent a lot of time researching the watch I wanted. And when I found it was perfect. Everything about it was what I wanted. Everything from price to looks to fit. And so I went and I got it. And I wore it during some really, really like intense times in my life, like really where like I'm in brand new territory and really was tested in a way I'd never been tested before. And I moved through a lot of that. And this is around the same time my watch stopped working. And so again, like I look at things, I look at life, I try to stay grounded in reality, but I can see like the symbolic signs all around me. So I'm like, all right, my watch isn't working anymore. So I stopped wearing it. And it just sat. It sat on my desk for a while, and I was aware, like I don't know where I am, but this watch, my synchronizing piece it's not working anymore. I'm going to take it off, but I'm not ready to get it fixed. And then life continues to unfold, and one day I reached this conclusion that, all right, I want to get it fixed. And I knew it was just a battery, or I assumed it was. I mean, it's a good watch, and I didn't want to go to like just like a watch repair. I didn't want to just go to a random jewelry store to have it fixed, particularly when I have a connection with not only this man, Mr. Rich, and whose son happens to be a watch repairman and artist and all sorts of other stuff, but he's like the best in the world. He graduated #1 from the Lidditz School of Watch Repair. I don't know what goes into watch repair, but I can make some assumptions about the exactness of it. And this guy's the best. So like to have him symbolically be the one who fixes my watch, like, I'm all over it. Like to me, that's like, this is what I wanted to do. And I drop it off to Case. And Case, ironically, seems to have an issue with time as well, because it took me 6 months to get that watch back. And there's part of me which was accepting, like, I'm not quite ready to synchronize. I'm not quite ready to synchronize. I'm not quite ready to synchronize. Otherwise, I would be kind of like all over Case. And I would text him and I'd call him somewhat regularly, but I didn't want to push it for a variety of reasons. But then that urge came, and I was like, I want to get my watch back now. And I called up Mr. Rich, and I was like, Mr. Rich, I'd like to come down for a sauna. Do you think we can arrange that? He's like, yeah, definitely. We can do it on Saturday. And so I'm like, perfect. And then I said, can you make certain that that Case brings me my watch? Because I knew the watch had been fixed. I just couldn't sync up with him. And I'd gone to maybe about 4 saunas, 3 saunas, since the watch was dropped off there. He lives about 45 minutes from where I live. And each time I went there, me and Case lives on the property as well, and I was not able to sync up with Case. But this was the day I was going to get my watch back. I really kind of like said, this is what I want. And Mr. Rich said it would happen. And as soon as I get out of the sauna for the first time, I see Case come walking down the path. And so we're synced up. And he's like, I got your watch, and everything was perfect. And he said to me, I was like, how much do I owe you? He was like, listen, I had it for so long, you don't owe me anything. I'm like, that's friggin' awesome. Obviously I wanted to pay the man for his work, but I was like, okay, I appreciate the, I could use the money elsewhere. So everything about that was perfect. Like everything was aligning in this perfect way. And then I realized on the car ride to and from, Jenny likes musicals, and she's like, I want to play one of my favorite musicals for you. And all of this, I was very aware of what was happening because I had just watched Interstellar that week. And I knew I was getting my watch back, and I knew Interstellar is all about timing and all sorts of it's about some weird stuff. And that's the sort of thing which we're talking about here is like the weird stuff, but in practical reality. I'm like, okay, I'm stepping into taking back that watch. Whatever that's going to be, I'm seeing that as part of my own personal journey. And so Jenny wants to play a musical, and I always surrender to whatever Jenny says musically because she has amazing taste in music, this huge wide breadth of genre. And so I'm like, all right, well, I like it. She's like, you're gonna love this. And she plays for me Hamilton the musical. Now, keep in mind, and she knew also, that was in her conscious mind. She was aware of the lining up of the Hamilton watch and all of that sort of stuff. But I hadn't heard that before. And so part of recognizing when we are connecting with these different etheric pathways is how it's anchored and grounded. And for me, though Hamilton the musical is about a different Hamilton. Hamilton Watch Company is named after the Rosicrucian founder of the city of Lancaster, which is where the watch company was. These are two different Hamiltons. And so, but you can see how they connect. So all of this was happening when I go and I pick up my watch. And I pick up my watch on Saturday, and that was 2220 or 202 222020. And again, it's all about synchronization. So now I know to be more aware of the watch and to bring my own personal synchronization practice and awareness to it to the next level. And I'm going to share how I do that in a different video, and that's only going to be on Subscribestar. But what I'm going to do is show how, now that I have this awareness of this watch, how I go about and symbolically am able to use it as a real tool for synchronization with whatever it is that you need to synchronize to. To me, that's just you synchronize with the golden ratio, and everything you connect to will be in that degree of harmony. But if you're interested in that, that's only available on Subscribestar. So now here's the kicker. This is my watch right here. And this here is the watch from the movie. And as you see, it's called the Khaki Field. Remember, I said that I looked at all the different watches that Hamilton had. I was very, very specific. I wanted a watch from this company, and I went through their entire watch inventory, and there's one watch which I could find. And let's see if I can make this bigger. It was the Hamilton khaki. Now, it's slightly different than this one because this is specifically a version for the movie Interstellar. But as far as I go, or as far as I see it, that's a pretty big indicator of the synchronizations. And as Goodwill Hunting said, how do you like them apples? This is Mike. Today is February 28th, 2020. I appreciate and grateful for everyone who is coming along on this ride. Until the next time.